Welcome back to another series of Coding with Doc at advanced level. Now in this one, what we're going to look at is the interaction between Python, programming language, and SQL, database. So you might be doing an AAQ course or some other course as well as a programming course where you've learnt databases and you've learnt how to build a relational database and to put things into tables and to build relationships. And really some of that knowledge underpins when you're using SQL around a database. But without further ado, let's get into the process of how to integrate SQL coding into your Python coding.
So in this section, what I want to do is look with you at SQL or SQL. Now, I'm conscious of the fact that behind all this, there's a chunk of theory around SQL itself, on which I'm kind of assuming a certain level of knowledge. So SQL, or SQL, as I've already said, is a kind of structured query language. That's what it stands for. And what that does is allows you to work with a relational database inside Python. Now, I have done videos on this same channel that look at relational databases in Access. These are building them so they work in Python. Now, in order to do that, what you need to understand is there are some kind of core words in this different language, this declarative language SQL, that allow you to do certain things in terms of managing data. One is the command select. And what select does is lets you put down a list of fields, things that you might want to appear on the screen. There's another command called from, which you then got to identify what table it's in. So from members.db or wherever it is. But you list the table using the from command. The next command is the command where. And where lets you identify a set of search criteria. So you can say where such and such is the case, and it'll do that. And then you get order by. So order by. And order by usually requires you to then follow it with ASC, ascending, or DSC, descending, and it just puts them into order. So if I wanted to say write an order on a product table, a database of products that I'd got, where I'd maybe got the names of some books, what subject they were, what price they were, what level they were aimed at, I would put together a command in a database that was like this: select product ID, the ID for the product that I've chosen, and also the product name. So you notice there that you're not having to put the thing in twice, you just put product ID, product name. You could also put in price. So you put in a bundle of things from, and then you'd say what table it's in, table product, where level equals level 3, which is A level, yeah, and order by. Now you could say ask or desk, or you could do something like order by the product name. So it puts them into the alphabetical order based on the product name there. Yeah. Now that would be a very typical SQL type query that lets you do that. Now, what I'm wanting to show you in this section is how to take those same ideas and to be able to use them within the context of a Access database. So to begin with, what I'm going to envisage is that we're going to set up a database, and I'm going to set up a database that's got pets in it, and in pets I'm going to have sales made by a salesperson, and I'm going to join them by each time we sell a pet, we record the salesperson's ID that sold it. So that's the kind of the basic kind of logical structure of what I'm doing. I'm going to do some pets, I'm going to do some sales, and the only information I'm going to record about the sales is who sold it, and that's going to be stored in a separate table. Now, there's clearly, if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about at this stage, you need to look at relational databases, you need to look at the work of Fred Codd, and you need to look at kind of all of that logic. And I might do some separate videos around all that, but that's not really my purpose here. My purpose here is to look very specifically at how all that works inside Python itself. So I'm going to begin by, as always, putting our imports at the top, then putting our variables, although I'm not intending to use any variables this session, then putting our definition, and I'm not intending to do any definitions, and then doing our main program. So it's going to be dead simple. Up in the import line, I am going to import something. I'm going to import SQL Lite. Now you'll notice, because the LL, it's not SQLL Lite, it's just SQLite as a database. So that brings in this SQL module, and that allows me to use it. And once I've done that, what I'm then going to do under kind of a major variable is say connect is create a database connection, and we're going to call it, now you can call it what you like, but we're going to call it test.db on this first one. So as you make your project or whatever you're doing with that, you need a local file that you're going to store the database in, and I'm deciding to store this one in a database which I've very simply called db or test.db. Now, into my main program. So what I want to do in my main program is open up a connection. So in terms of that connection, I want a current connection. So it's just going to allow me to connect to that database of those two lines of command. Now, when you start a database, you've got this idea about, are you adding to a database, are you creating a database, are you getting rid of a database? And the problem is some of these packages can keep a database sat there in its memory. So it's always a good idea to start with to just delete any pre-existing table. So how do you do that? There's my comment. How do I do that? I do current.execute, and then I'm going to put in an SQL command, drop table if exists pets. So in effect, get rid of pets if there is such a thing called pets. Sat in your memory, get rid of it. Now, having done that, I now want to create the table. So this is me. The first one was just me getting rid of it, if there was anything already there, and you can see I've been playing with this before you started on the run screen. So you get rid of it, and then I now want to create it. So to create it, let's execute again. And this time around, we're going to put into a new SQL command, create table. So that's a straightforward SQL command there in the capitals, create table. What table do I want? I want a table called pets. And inside pets, I want a set of fields. I want a field called ID, and that's going to be an integer. And I want a field called name, and that's going to be text. I want a field called price, and that's going to be an integer. And I want a field called sales ID, and that also is going to be an integer. You notice you don't put the comma between the name and what it is. And then having done that, I'm in effect saying, now stop. You don't need to do any more of those. Yeah, let's just stop that. We've made that table. We've got that pets table with those 4 fields in it, and that's the end of my SQL command, and then the end of the bracket for the current execute. So having done that, I now might want to start putting some data into that table. So again, cur execute, put in a command into that connected thing, that database that we've got, and we're putting in these SQL commands. And what I want to do now is use the SQL command insert. So I'm inserting into pets. So that's pure SQL, insert into pets. And I want to put in a set of values which are going to go in the format of 4 things. Now we know what those 4 things are: the ID, the name, the price, and the sales ID. But as far as the machine's concerned, not a clue. And then, so that's the command, insert into pets value those, and then I've now got to give it the data. So what data do I want to put in? Now you can see on the screen opposite, I was experimenting with this, just checking it worked. So I'm going to put in 1 as being pet number 1. I've got a name for my pet, which I'll stick with the same one, Sparky. Yeah, so we'll call it Sparky. And then I want to do a price for my pet. So we'll say its price is £641. And then who sold it? Salesman 1. Now we've not made Salesman 1 at this point in time, but in effect we've created that current execute of that. Now, what I might want to also now be able to do is to read from the table. So you can, I've deleted anything that pre-existed, I've created a new table, and now I want to be able to read from the table that I've set up. So to do that again, another SQL command, so cur execute, to have an SQL command. What cur execute do I want? I want the command select. And what do I want to do? I want to select everything, so star, from pets. So select everything from pets. So that just brings everything in from the pets database. And then what I'm going to do is create a variable which I'm going to call rows, and I'm going to tell it there that what I want it to do is to fetch all the commands, to fetch all the rows, in effect, all the data that's in pets. Now, in reality, we know we've just put in one record, 1 and Sparky, but fetch them all. And then in my main program, what I'm going to do is to say go through that, because of course rows could have lots of things in it. So I'm going to say for row in rows. So a simple little loop that's going to go through rows and print them off one at a time. And then I'm going to say inside that, as you pull off each row individually, print the row. Now, what that's given me then is a table that I've opened and deleted anything that's there. Then I've made a table which I've called pets, and what I've done is inserted into that table some data, and then I've read from it using standard SQL commands using cur execute, because I'd use cur as the connection to the test database file that I'd run. And when you run that, you should simply see another copy there of me pulling back some data. You can see I've ever so slightly tweaked the price of the pet as the third one. But it's in effect, it's expected integer, 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 except for that middle one, which is text, and that's why we had to put the Sparky in quotes in that middle one. So that gives you that first idea about setting. Now I'd like to test your understanding of that once you've made that table, and ask you to kind of take it, play with it, and see, as well as this Sparky, this pet called Sparky, that's £641, that you can make 3 more pets. So pet 2, pet 3, pet 4, charge them whatever you want in terms of price. You could mix up the salesmen, so you could have different, but let's stick to just 2 salesmen. So you only end up having putting salesmen in as a sales ID of either 1 or a sales ID of 2. And let's see if you can do that, and then I'll walk you through how to do it.
So let's now look at that investigate example.
Well, let's have a look at that particular challenge. Now, really, in order to do it, I want this line of SQL. And what I'm doing is taking that line of SQL, and I'm going to need to replicate it 4 times for the 4 animals. So each animal will need its own separate unique ID field. The price for the animals really doesn't matter at all. So let's have one that's £1,000, one that's a mere £100, and one that's, say, £400. And as I said, let's mix them up between salesman 1 and salesman 2. So we'll put those 2 as being salesman 2, and the first and the last as being salesman 1. So what was this second animal called? The £1,000 animal called Dragon. It could be a Komodo dragon, could be an actual dragon if they existed. And then we'll have a third animal which we'll call Prince. yeah, which could be a dog or it could be a chicken or whatever else. And then we'll have a fourth animal, which we'll call Martha. And what you've then got is something there that's picked up these four different animals, ran them through, and added those to the database. Now what I want to do is test your understanding of that a second time and look at now the printout. So if I run this now, you'll see that when that prints, it prints all four of them. Can you make it print so it only prints the first two? It only prints Sparky and Dragon.
Now let's go through this second investigate example where you play with the code and see what it does.
So if I wanted to change that printout, so instead of it giving me Sparky and Dragon and Prince and Martha, it just gives me the first two records. What I would do is where it says for row in rows, I could tell it to there, look at this cur execute select star from pets, and I can change that SQL command to say limit to. And then we've still got this fetch, we've still got this print, but the SQL will change how it pulls through the information. And when I run that now, it just gives me Sparky and Dragon. So I'm going to take that out though, and then I want you to try and do another investigate challenge. And this time round, what I want you to do is, can you tweak it so it prints just the pets that cost more than, let's say, £350? So it knocks out Prince, who's only costing 100. Yeah, can you make it so it just picks the pets that cost more than £350?
These are each little examples, but together they're embedding the ideas about what we're doing, how the code's working, and this interaction where you're stopping, pausing the video, having a go at doing it, and then coming back to it. These help to embed the skills in your own learning.
Let's pick up that idea then that we just had about how you can make it print just the pets with the value that's more than £350. So that's select star from pets, and this is going back to your basic SQL theory, where price, now remember it sees that third number as price, an integer value, where price is greater than 350. And you can leave the rest of that pretty much just as it is. You might put a semicolon at the end there, you don't need to, but you might do. And then you leave that as it is. Now, what you could change the print here, so you do a print possibly before it, before you get into that rows that says print the pets with a value more than £350. Now remember, it doesn't print the pets themselves here, so it's going to print the whole of those rows, but it's going to print them out. So if we run that, for example, you'll see that it then gives us just the three pets with a value of more than £350, Sparky and Dragon and Martha. Yeah, and so again, I'm going to take out that row at this point, and I'm going to take out that search at this point. I've given you enough of that kind of playing around with SQL. Now, what I'm hoping to do at this second point is to then think through the idea about how do you make a second table? So how can we add a table in with sales data? So again, here, I would do this. So here we've made this execute program. So I would literally copy that set of commands. And if I copy that set and then drop them in again, I can say drop it if it exists. And let's say we're doing a sales table. Always important to drop it just in case there's one in memory. I'm not anticipating one in memory this time. I haven't experimented with this beforehand. But I'm going to say create a table called sales. So that's using the same command as previously. We'll keep an ID, we'll keep a name, but we can get rid of these other two. We don't need the salesman, we don't need the price, so we can get rid of those. And then keeping exactly the same, but it's not into pets, is it? It's into sales. It's not into pets, it's into sales. And we only did two salespeople. So we can take out these other two rows. Salesperson one, we're going to call Susie, and salesperson two, we're going to call Libby. Yeah, so we've introduced two salespeople in there, and we can just take out the extra commas because those are fields that don't exist in the database itself. We've just built those two people. Now, if I want to read from that, I could do select star from sales, pull it into rows, print the rows, and if I run that now, we won't get the, oh, I didn't take out the two question marks. Oh, there's only two fields, isn't there? So if I run that now, it will give me the answer with just the two salespeople, salesperson Susie and salesperson Libby. Now, I could play around with that print, I could change that print, but you can see how that's taken those same ideas and added it. Now, what I'm interested in now is, can you see a way of tweaking that so you add a third salesperson, which we'll call, say, Bethan?
On this one, what I'm wanting you to do is just to keep practicing. It gets you familiar with the code, it gets you familiar with what it does. Adding that third salesperson, which we'll call Bethan, you literally just copy that particular line. There it is. And you've copied it, you've dropped down a line, and you make sure that the ID field is different, 3, and you put in the text in quotes as Bethan. Now, some of you will be sat there thinking, or maybe you've researched and looked online and thought, well, there's another way of doing that. You could have done 3 and Bethan there and avoided the need for this second bracket here. Now, if you do that, that's actually called SQL injection. And I'm sure that one of the interesting things you can look up is the dangers of SQL injection. So I'm strongly encouraging you not to do it that particular way, to do it this way that I've shown you here with the question marks. And the logic behind that is it's actually called a parameter query, where you're adding the data in, and it's the right way to do it. Now, what I'm interested in doing at this point is, can we join those two tables together? So that when we print here, it doesn't just print everything from sales. We maybe print that Sparky was £641 and it was sold by Susie. Now, how do I know it's Susie? Because Sparky's got a 1 next to it on the end for the sales ID, and the sales ID that's number 1 is Susie. If it was Dragon or Prince, it would be sales ID number 2, which is Libby. So in order to do that, what you've got to do is write another SQL statement. And that SQL statement's going in this part here where it's, we're selecting, but we're choosing what we're selecting. So we're selecting pets ID. Now, up till now, we tended to put star, everything. So I'm going to pets, and I'm picking from pets the ID field. Yeah, I'd recapitalize that. I just looked and noticed I left it ID. So it needs to match pets.id. And we'll also take pets.name, which is another field that's there. And we'll also take pets.price. So that's 3 of the things, but we're not going to take sales ID. Instead of sales ID, we're going to take sales.name, which is which is that one there. Sales has got ID and it's got name, and we want to take the name of the person, Susie or Libby or Bethan, whichever one it is in this particular case. And where we're taking those from, we're taking those from the command pets or the table pets, and we're doing an inner join. So this is SQL now I'm writing in, an inner join with sales by joining pets dot sales ID, that field that's in pets, sales ID, with sales dot ID, which is the one that's in sales itself. And then we'll quote that, finish the bracket, and that does that particular line. Now that's a long line of text, but you're going to want the whole of that line there. I could stretch it across, I guess, on the screen here so that you can see the end of that line and it'll run through. And then we've got rows is a fetch all, and then we could do a print that sits outside the actual print there if we wanted, that said print joining two tables to look up a sales name. And then we'll do print, and it's picked up the whole of that row. It's picked up the data that we've asked it to pick up. And if we run that now, we press run, and it says, okay, we must save it. And I've managed to miss something. It's a full stop I've put in between the two things instead of a comma on the parameter query. And as you run that, I've missed on and you can see that that's joined up the two tables there looking for the records, and it's stacked them based on pet.price, and it's put in there the salesperson's name instead of their number. And that's given you the idea of drawing data from two tables and joining it together. Now I want to look at the idea about how you might group those tables, or you might group records in that table. And that's happening here. So where we've got here this idea that we're selecting things, you could do this instead. So if we'll keep that one, but we'll in effect put a variant underneath it. And so you'd use your cur.execute command, so we can put in some SQL, and then you put in select sales.name. So that's picking up from the sales table the person's name, the seller's name, Susie or whoever. And then you might put count how many pets ID that they've sold. And then what we want to do is we want to do a group that's concatenated, and what we're going to drag in there is pets.name, and I'm going to do what I did before, that idea of being able to drop a line in the midst of one of these SQL statements. Now you've got to be careful, like last time around, that you remember the space at the start of the next line. If it's too close on, it sees it as pet's name without the space. So you want that little first space in there that just gives it a movement on. So then we're summing up pets.price, and we're doing that from pets, but we're having that inner join again. And this time round, we're going to do sales. So we're joining sales again on, and we're going to do it with pets.sales sales ID, get the capitalization right. Mine was ID. And that's linked to, of course, sales.I small d, as I did on the sales table. Would have been helpful if I'd kept the capitalization the same on both. By sales.name. And then we've closed that SQL statement. And then once we've done that, what we've then got is rows fetching them. We've said this is joining two tables to look up a sales name into the pets table and group it on the salesperson. And then when we go to row and we're printing row. Now, you can then pick individual things. So you can say row 0, which is sales.name, the first one. Yeah, and then you could say they sold, and then row.1. Now, row 1 in this case is count pets.id. So they sold 6. So that's going to be 6 pets, such as, and then we'll do row 2, which is going to be the animal's name, for the total of, and now we also brought in as well, I'm just looking back at that statement, we've joined in the name, we've joined in the price, so for a total of price, so we want the price, so that's for a total of row 3, and then instead of putting the pound sign before it, which would have been easy, we can just put row 3 pounds like that, so it's kind of made it into a sentence. And if we run that one, just hashtag out that second line, you then get Libby sold 2 pets, such as Dragon and Prince, for a total of, and it's adding up those totals in terms of prices because it's seeing them and it's grouping that together in terms of information. And that allows you, in effect, to kind of work with your HTML a bit more and drag out those kind of bits and pieces. Now what I want to do is look at 2 other ideas inside SQL. One is the idea of updating, and the other is the idea of deleting. So I'm going to cover updating and then deleting in order. So in terms of this one, we've clearly got our import, we've got our connected to a test database, we've got our con, we've created our data here in terms of pet values, we've created our salesperson values. Now, what we might have decided is that what we've got is a pet that is a new pet. So we might have decided that, say, in terms of our pets, instead of a dragon, we've got another pet which we'll call a cat or Tom that is of a cheaper value than that dragon, which was £1,000. So we've got that for a much lower amount. So what we could do there is say A is 2 because dragon was 2. B is Tom because dragon, that's dragon's name, so we'll call it Tom. And C is, let's say, £50. So where the other one was £1,000, this is now £50, and that's Tom. Now, in order to update that, what you do is you do this. Cur execute. So you've got variables in effect that are coming in. Now they could be coming in your program. Yeah, they don't need to be coming in as solid variables like I've done them there. You can update pets based on set the name to a question mark, parameter type query again, price to a question mark, and where ID matches a question mark. So that's given you kind of the statement of the SQL. Now, when we put those in, we've got to tell it what the data is. So the data is B, the match. It's the name is Tom. And then we want to put in C, the price. And then we want to put in the match A. So we're giving it in the kind of the order it's expecting that information. And we clearly need to close that second bracket, otherwise it kind of won't run. Now, run that with that. It shouldn't be any different to the previous time. And again, sloppy typing error, cur.execute. And then we run that. And we add a line that needs to do that connect, so it puts it in. And once we've done that connect, we want to then put those through. Now, I'm just going to get rid of that kind of the big where statement down the bottom that we've been using before, and we'll just simply do a select everything from pets. And I just noticed I've missed that comma there. And there you can see it's running that through and joining up those tables. And this time around it's got rid of dragon and it's put in prince in its place. So what I want to do finally is look at this idea of deleting inside an SQL structure. Now, delete is relatively straightforward. So let's just take out those two. And we'll take out that print as well that's there. And indeed, for the sake of simplicity, we'll take out this bunch of stuff that we did there. So I'm just hashtagging that out so it's not running. And we've just simply got those pets to begin with. So we've inserted into the pets table Sparky, Dragon, Prince, and Martha. Now, what you might want to do then is this idea of about kind of adding ones, putting further ones in, etc. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep that line. So selecting everything from pets, because we've already got pets at the top. And we've got it picking up this row from pets and it's printing that in. Now, if I wanted to add a particular new record, so I'll do current execute and then insert into pets values, and then so we've got that, and then we decide to enter into it a fifth record, which we'll call Norway. And that'll be £150, and it was salesman 3. So we've entered that particular record in. Now, if we printed it down here and we simply just do a print row, we'll get rid of all that kind of fanciness in terms of the print. We'll just do a print row. What that will do as we run that is give us all 5 of those records. Now, what I'm interested in doing is taking that set of 5 that's working there for all the records with it added, and then creating a new command. So a new command, cur.execute. Now, so it's SQL I can type, So delete from pets, where name equals Norway. Now, actually, I'll put that in single quotes there rather than the double quotes, so it keeps it happy. You were noticing it was changing colour in terms of the text there. Now, there I've deliberately deleted it, and if I then take that pair of lines, and just before it, I take that line, so it fetches the lines a fresh time. So I'm deliberately taking that one, I've dropped it in there as well, and we run that, and what we get now is two, one with Norway and one without Norway, and there you can see the act of deleting. Now I'm going to turn to a practice question that I want you to do. The broader make challenges are important. They just give you a chance to show that you've understood everything that we've covered in this particular session. And really SQL's a key skill, because what it does is it talks you through how to interact databases and data with the program that you're building. And there'll be lots of examples that any of you might find in a project or that in real life, where you've got these great big data sets and you're wanting to drag them into a Python piece of code that you're writing, and you really need SQL in order to bridge that gap. So this is the challenge. What I want you to do is to use the skills that we have learned to build me a database with two tables, members and bookings. And what I want is some options running off those two tables where you've built some separate definitions that'll say pull them together in a report and calculate various things. So it'll calculate how many classes they've booked and how much fees they've paid. It'll allow you to add members, it'll allow you to subtract members, and also it'll allow you to do an update for somebody that's paid more than 100 quid to change their membership type, the third of the fields, from kind of standard to VIP. Good luck. Well then, let's run through a possible answer to that particular challenge. So I've imported SQLite as before. I've set up a database. This time I've called it gym.db instead of, I think it was practice.db last time round. What I've done is I've dropped an existing members table and created one with a member ID as a primary key, name, text, etc. I then created a bookings table with booking ID as an integer that's primary key, class name and fees. And then I've thrown in a set of data into the members table and thrown in a set of data into the bookings table and created that kind of setup as a single definition. I've then added the ability to add a member. Now here I'm using a different command called try and accept, which I'm going to cover in more detail in a later video, because you won't have covered that as much at GCSE, but really it's a bit like it's do this unless this happens, or unless this happens and then eventually do this. So it's kind of a cross between a while statement and an if statement, really. It's kind of, it's doing it like a while statement, but then doing it in an if statements format. So what it's trying to do is it's trying to put in the member IDs, etc., into the database, inserting those values. If there's an error, then it's saying the member ID must be an error. If there's a database with the thing, it's saying, well, the problem there is the member already exists. And then the else is it then closes that connection because it's successfully added that particular member. I've then done the same for adding a booking, and it's pretty much identical to the adding a member. It's following a similar structure where it's trying to add it, and then it's doing the two possible errors that you might have as a result of that. I then did the bit where it generates the report. So on the generating report, what I've done is I've asked it, type in your member ID, check that that's a valid member ID. If it is, select them from members, join the two IDs where that's the case, then do a kind of a nice format that says these are the reports, and then return those two values. If it doesn't find it, say they've not done a class. And then one that does the VIP upgrade, which again checks through those, checks the total spent, and then tells you this member's worthy of the VIP steer status if they've got that far. And then finally a menu where I've gone, you can pick a new member, you can log a class booking, you can view the report and process VIP upgrades, you can exit. So if you pick 1, it's running member. If you pick 2, it's running booking. If you pick 3, then it's running generate a report and storing that variable and then putting that into the VIP upgrade. And then the final option for exit the system, I've used the break command to kick you out of the menu at that point. And if none of that works, it says it's an invalid sequence and makes you go back round again. And then what I've done at the start is said, start by showing the menu. And that gives you a kind of run through of a possible solution to that particular question. Thank you for persevering through this session of Coding with Doc. We've covered all around the idea of SQL and how SQL works in interaction with Python. As always, if you've enjoyed the session, please subscribe. It helps us keep in touch with one another. I'm keeping adding content. I'm wanting you to keep subscribing and sharing this content with your friends and with others. Thanks a lot for going through this one. And as I say, I look forward to seeing you on the next.